Today we're speaking with Sanjay Desai, and the topic is S&OP and the processes in an organization. This is a two-part series, and this is part one. So, Sanjay, can you first provide an introduction?
Yes, thanks, Dustin. Hi, I'm Sanjay Desai, a supply chain professional who started a journey with UniLever in India in their Mumbai plant as a blue-collar warehouse worker in 1983. Over the last 34 years, worked my way up in diverse organizations, multiple geographies, and handled end-to-end supply chain functions. Worked for some of the best Fortune 500 multinationals like Unilever, Aventis Pharma, ExxonMobil, Apple Computers, Dell Global, S.S. Johnson, Thermo Fisher Scientific, and finally Huntsman as director of their supply chain for Greater APAC. I left Huntsman in December 2016 and embarked the next phase of my career as a freelance supply chain professional. Very happy to connect with you, Dustin, today. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. So, what is sales and operations planning?
Well, S&OP, as is known as Sales and Operations Planning, is a very strategic senior management tool which aims at improving an end-to-end value chain efficiency of an enterprise. It is not about supply chain only, and that's why I mentioned value chain and enterprise-wise. S&OP process creates a robust framework around the core processes of the business, and this framework allows the senior leader to effectively build and communicate their execution plan, also understand the moving dynamics of the business, and to have the ability to quickly shift gears and execute smartly in the changing environment. This process of self-calibration is repeated at regular intervals using S&OP meetings as a platform. Over to you, Dustin.
So, when S&OP came into the picture at that time, how was this process? How did this process evolve, and how far has it gone?
So, I would say first it's good you ask this question because S&OP goes as back as 1980s. Oliver White, who were the owners of this tool, mentioned that they first implemented this process somewhere in the mid to late 1980s, which means that it is around now for close to 30 years as we see today. Well, it has evolved to a full-grown process by now in most of the organizations. The core elements have remained more or less as they began in 1980s. However, what has changed so far is the execution methodology of this process. So different organizations have digested this process, understood it differently, and amended some of the execution principles to suit to their business model. Meaning it has gone in different directions. People call it S&OP. While it may not have retained its original sanctity as such per the Oliver White, it is still around, and I think it is going to be around for the next at least decade, Dustin.
Who should own the S&OP in an organization? And are you aware, or what's the general practice today in the industry?
Thank you. You asked this question, Dustin. This has been a topic which is debated widely in various opinions, and you will hear various opinions in many different organizations. I would say that keeping everything aside, S&OP is a process which is most effective and will produce desired result if it is functionally owned by commercial organization and driven by the highest authority in that function. It is very critical. Should be owned by commercial and driven by the highest authority. Supply chain is in best position to run this process since it impacts working capital, customer service, and delivery efficiencies, which predominantly are supply chain KPIs. So there is an insurable interest for supply chain to run this. The senior leadership involvement is not just a demonstrative one, but it is a practical one aimed at keeping the S&OP focus on the futuristic view, being very strategic and decision-oriented. Over to you, Dustin.
Not long ago, we started to hear about another process called IBP. What is IBP, and is there a synergy in IBP with S&OP, or are they different?
Well, great. IBP has started not very long ago, as you said, which is right. It stands for Integrated Business Process. It again comes from Oliver White only. So it's more or less like a big brother for S&OP. In aesthetics and its own principles, It is more or less the same process, but with the differences being in the nomenclatures they use and the overarching broader scope that IBP has. We can say IBP is more evolving. Financially, it is more woven and interconnected, incorporating financial plans and budgets of the organization at various stages in the entire process. Explained in another way, IBP is about shifting the focus of current S&OP beyond supply chain function and bringing in executives from other functions inside from an ownership perspective. So more or less the principles are same, but S&OP is typically seen as a supply chain process, whereas IBP can be really organization and enterprise-wide. Now here again, although Oliver White does not agree to this sentiment, it is widely felt by industry leaders and practitioners that IBP is actually like a big brother to S&OP process.
What are the key elements that an S&OP should address?
Well, there are 5 broad areas, right? And at a high level, S&OP is known to be a 5-step process. Now, as I said earlier, that organizations have crafted and executed differently. So it can be 6 or it can be 7 or it can be 4 as well. However, in its intent and as an Oliver White have defined it, typically it's the 5-step process and which is executed in a certain regularity and with a certain rhythm, right? It is highly practical and recommended to run this process at least once in a month. And the 5 broad key elements that should be executed are, number 1, product review or PR, which should address new product introductions, end of life, pricing of the product. Number 2 element is demand review, which is called DR. It should review changes in the demand patterns. It should look at market activities and the deals that the commercial team wants to have. Third element is supply review, called as SR. It looks at availability of supply, factory shutdowns and factory capabilities and asset utilization. Number 4 element is financial review or an integrated review, typically called as IR. This will address the P&L changes in the last S&OP, cost impacts to the organization, and conduct a gap analysis, including what-if scenario. And the 5th element is probably the most senior of this is MBR or management business review, which is typically actions, alignments, and decisions, where all these functions will come together and actually have a management business review to view your futuristic plan as well as what is in the pipeline to make sure that the current business dynamics are aligned, actions are laid down, alignment sought, and a decision are taken at the end of the meeting. So that is the overall format of the S&OP, Dustin.
Sharing today, Sanjay, and I look forward to this part 2 of this interview in the near future.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Dustin. Great.